If you're really happy with the way the country is being run, with your prospects, don't vote. Stay at home. But if, like me, you think life's pretty unfair on young people, lockdown hit really hard, have a look at what I've got to say. I'm standing up. I'm leading a revolt against Labour and Conservatives. I want real change. Go to the Reform website, have a butcher's.
Would you legalise cannabis?
I've always thought we should decriminalise cannabis, or drugs that are even stronger. All I would say is we need a strong cannabis, so we're much higher. The field work was done 8, 10, 12 days ago. For us, that's a remarkable situation. I've been saying this ever since I launched back on the 4th of June. I came back into it, I said, look, we need a lot more young people going into cannabis to keep the peace. I think the general public are now beginning to get that.
Despite its impressive length, it's a nimble navigator, and some can be highly venomous. Just like the tarantula it's killing, the centipede has 2 curved, hollow fangs which inject paralyzing venom. This centipede is a predator.
Shows how disconnected he is with the people of this country. They were voting against 50 years of people like you lying to them. They did it, you promised.
But I will say this, if I was an American citizen, I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton if you paid me.
Oh! Oh my God!
Are you going for a free trade deal, yes or no?
Thank you, gentlemen. Could you...
Stop and search.
Centipede.
You cannot barrage the Farage.
Let's meet the 7 politicians vying for your votes over the next 90 minutes.
Co-leader of the Green Party.
I'm Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK. Just before we came on air, we overtook the Conservatives in the national opinion polls. We are now the opposition to Labour.
Right said Fred.
Wales.
Hello and welcome to the ITV election debate. It has been a fractious few weeks in the election so far, grappling with issues like immigration. Rishi Sunak's at an all-time low, and when many of us feel is broken, what can they say to restore some faith? Dennis.
I was born again. It was an amazing thing.
Thank you very much indeed, Dennis. Ryan Apiowath.
Wales, but also in Wales we have had Wales.
Nigel Farage.
Well, Dennis, the NHS has 2 fundamental problems. One, Penny mentioned.
Conservative.
Caseloads up by 43%. Why? Because we have an exploding population. All of our public services are under pressure because the population has increased by 6 million since the Conservatives came to power. It's impossible to keep up. Secondly, everyone talks about more money, more money. We've massively increased the amount we spend on the NHS. We've gone from spending about 7% of the national cake to over 11% of the national cake for worse and worse returns. And we need to look at countries like France, who spend exactly the same sum of money, but get far better services by people paying in to an insurance fund. It acts on a mutual basis. Those that can't pay don't. They get better results. Let's think more broadly.
The elephant in the room is the fact that it's not migration is the problem, it's the fact that we need more people coming in to work in our hospitals and to work in our social care sector, which has been decimated by your Brexit.
Right said Fred.
All we want is for it to be free at the point of delivery. That's what matters. And actually, Labour are quite right to say, hey, let's use the private sector to try and reduce some of the waiting list. Why not actually give people tax relief on paying money into private insurance to relieve more of the pressure?
I chose my words carefully. Wales.
We want to make the economy fairer so that the billionaires and multi-millionaires, those with the broader shoulders who can easily afford to, pay a bit extra to fund the public services that we all rely on.
They'll leave the country. They're leaving already. Even under a Conservative government, we've got a brain drain, the likes of which we haven't had since 1978.
Can I come back on that
And if Labour are in power, maybe with your support, what'll happen is even more will leave. Just taxing the rich doesn't solve this. And everyone here is talking about more money, more investment. I'm telling you, we've massively increased investment in the NHS for a worse return. It's not just about money.
I'll introduce some facts to this debate.
I
When
just
the
did.
rules on non-dom status were changed in this country in 2017, there was no difference in who was leaving the country amongst those that were affected by that change and those who weren't.
Nonsense.
No, that's true.
They're leaving now.
I'm leaving you, you cow!
We can't tax our way out of this. We've got the highest tax burden
But that is
in
exactly
70
what
years.
you're going to do.
Good.
You have a black hole.
Folks, I've explained to you, we've massively increased over the last few years the percentage of the national cake we put into the NHS for a worse return. Does nobody else acknowledge we need to spend the money better?
We even had a message from a 12-year-old who said his teacher is literally crumbling. Be honest, do you think our education system is still world-class? Nigel Farage.
Scotland was world-class at one point. It
Still
certainly
is world-class.
isn't now. It's gone right down the international rankings. Look, there is a problem. We know the buildings, the rat concrete, all of that, but we are back to the subject that nobody wants to discuss. The exploding population means our schools, our class sizes are getting bigger. Of course, we've recruited more teachers. We need more teachers with an exploding population. And it's a constant problem that none of the other panellists even want to discuss.
Angela Rayner, tell Nigel Farage about the policy that you have on finding new teachers.
Well, first of all, I respectfully disagree that we have the exploding population in our schools. We have falling roles in our schools at the moment, actually, and that is a problem for many of our primary schools. But what we've said is that we would end 6,500 qualified teachers in the classroom.
Look, you know, if you put 20% on private school fees, all you'll finish up with are a lot more, probably 25% of those currently in private school will then be a burden for state schools. It is a self-defeating policy that removes parental choice.
OK.
Well, Nigel, those schools could...
OK, thank you.
Our state schools have had austerity and have cuts and cuts. Those schools could absorb some of those costs so they didn't have to pass it on to all of the people...
So you're happy with more pupils going into the state sector?
But we cannot afford to give private schools a tax break when our state system cannot have the right teachers in the classrooms that they deserve.
OK, must bring in Penny Mordaunt now. Thank you, Nigel Farage. Now, let's get straight on to our next question from Christine from Manchester. Christine.
Migration levels are too high. What are you going to do?
Thank you very much indeed, Christine. Angela Rayner.
Thanks, Christine. And what we need at the moment is overseas workers to fill our skills gap. Labour's industrial and skills strategy is about relying on overseas workers.
Thank you very much indeed, Angela Rayner. Nigel Farage.
Well, it's funny Angela Rayner says that because Labour today launched their 6 key priorities for the general election and didn't mention the single most important issue affecting the lives of everybody in this country, namely the population explosion caused directly by migration. The reason we voted Brexit and the reason Penny's party got the massive majority in 2019 is we voted to reduce the numbers coming in, and the numbers have exploded. I mean, honestly, unbelievable. 1 in 30 people walking on the street out there has come in the last 2 years alone. The answer is we have to have net migration at 0. It means skilled workers can come, we can go and work abroad. We have to have a freeze on the total numbers of those coming in.
Thank you very much. Carla Daniel.
Christine, you're right. Migration does change communities, in my view. It can be unsettling, especially when change happens fast. We think it's shameful. The solution is scapegoating or pulling up the drawbridge.
Thank you.
Right said Fred.
So Scotland has a migration problem.
Bring in Nigel Farage here has been on a dog whistle tour of the UK for many, many years and exploiting the anxieties that people have, and we really need to change the way that we talk about this issue.
It's making us poorer. That's the point.
Thank you.
It's making us poorer.
Thank you. We are doing these answers uninterrupted. Thank you. Penny Mordaunt.
What we are proposing is no cap, no number and no plan.
OK. Thank you, Penny Mordaunt, for that. Please raise your hand if you think the net level of legal migration, that is the additional number of people coming to the country to work and live, needs to fall. Please raise your hand.
Oh my God!
Wow. Number needs to fall.
What a sorry
Nigel
reflection.
Farage, Penny Mordaunt.
It's due to fall anyway.
Daisy Cooper, Angela Rayner. Thank you very much.
The Westminster status quo. That's exactly. That's the Westminster status quo. Of course it is. The four main parties.
No, it isn't. Right said Fred.
There was some pretty strong language used towards Nigel Farage about dog whistle tours and scapegoat politics. What's your response to that?
I'm just talking numbers. We haven't even mentioned housing yet.
But could you respond to that point in particular?
Oh, no, I ignore that nonsense. Complete nonsense. I'm just talking pure facts. Housing. We have to build one new home every 2 minutes just to cope with legal net migration under this Conservative government. It is literally impossible. And as for the numbers coming in, I would respond to this. 50% of the 750,000 who are coming in a year are dependents. They're not wealth creators. And mass migration is making us poorer. You'll hear, oh, GDP's going up. Well, of course it is. There are more people. GDP per capita, our relative wealth, has declined for the last 6 consecutive quarters.
I hear Nigel talking a lot about. I hear Nigel Farage talking a lot about dependence. The problem that we have in higher education now is that changes in visa requirements means that family members aren't able to come and study to accompany students to Welsh universities. That is causing major problems in terms of revenue for our higher education.
You shouldn't bring your mum. You come to university in Britain, you can't bring your mum, can you? I mean, come on.
They should be able to bring their loved ones with them.
Okay, thank you.
And when Nigel Farage tells you all that migrants are making you poor and they're the problem, don't believe him. Do you want to know the biggest problem facing the UK economy right now? The Conservative Party.
Christine, the answer to your question is, what are they going to do about it? Neither of them will do anything. These people have lied to us repeatedly. And Labour, and
you made a career of doing that.
Repeatedly. I know I've actually always told the truth. Always told the truth. Always said what I've... And Labour, it's not even in your first 6 priorities for government. You haven't got the will to do anything about it. Nothing under these is going to change. And the vast majority, not on this panel, obviously, because they're not representative in that sense, the vast majority of Britons want net migration reduced significantly.
Yes or no? If elected, would you ever rejoin the EU or the single market?
No, we're free. Unfortunately, we're governed incompetently, but at least there are mistakes and not somebody else's.
It's now time to turn to Janice from Penarth in South Wales.
Good evening. Why am I working every day within food banks?
Thank you very much indeed, Janice. Nigel Farage.
Because people are getting poorer. It's quite simple. You know, I mentioned a few moments ago that GDP, wealth per capita, has fallen for the last 6 consecutive quarters. And it's very much, and it's been the same, it sort of began with Labour, but it's continued. It's very much a country in which the big corporates and the big banks and a certain group of people have become richer exponentially, and everybody else has fallen behind. But we are back to the population explosion and the massive impact it's having on the lives of people. And we've got to try to get the population to steady.
Suella Braverman has actually said that 2-child benefit cap should be lifted. She's spoken quite warmly about you in recent times. Well, I wasn't asking you to respond to that necessarily, Nigel Farage, but she would welcome a lifting of that cap. Would you agree with Suella?
I think we should encourage people to have families. I think we should encourage people to have children.
So so they should all be. All of those children.
And I think we should also encourage people in marriage to have some tax benefits as well. I really do.
So that's a yes. A lifting of the 2-child.
Yeah, we've got to help people.
Point out the embarrassment here for Angela Rayner. We have Nigel Farage wanting to get rid of the 2-child limit, and Labour is refusing to.
Thank you, Nigel Farage.
My question is to Penny Mordaunt. Given that your 2010 manifesto, your 2015 manifesto, your 2017 manifesto said you'd reduce net migration to tens of thousands, your 2019 manifesto said immigration would massively reduce, and that net 4.3 million people have come into the country since that time, why on earth should anybody believe the 5th manifesto that promises cuts to net migration?
because of the record of this Prime Minister. So we've had figures out today that show that visa applications have fallen by 30%, and the OBR's own forecasts say that Nigel is a Labour enabler.
Okay. Nigel,
and he is enabling no cap, no target and no plan.
Penny, let Nigel Farage come back.
I don't believe a single word that you say. You've deceived us with the last 4 manifestos. I don't believe you in the 5th. And as for being a Labour enabler...
Tactical nuke incoming!
We are now ahead of you in the national polls.
OK, thank you.
A vote for you is actually now a vote for Labour. I do agree that the first past the post system has led to the 2 big parties. Well, one was big, not after today's polls, but there we are. They're both mushy sort of SDP parties in the middle. I would change the voting system. I think the House of Lords is an abomination. The fact that it's filled up with party donors is a complete disgrace. There must be an elected element. And finally, let's give the people the ability to call more referendums so they can decide the biggest issue of their lives.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Nigel Farage.
I'm just surprised that Nigel Farage wants another referendum on Scottish independence. I'm sure there's a lot of folk back in Scotland who'd be...
Oh, come on, you don't want to lose again, do you?
Right, said Fred. To see that happen. Well, politicians at Westminster, I'm sure the Labour Party would back that premise.
You had your pop.
But it is now time for our candidates' closing statements, and our first this evening is with Carla Denyer.
I'm going to be straight with you. Politics is about finger-pointing and squabbling.
Thank you very much, Penny Mordaunt.
Tonight, Angela Rayner has proved one thing. Labour will put up your taxes.
Thank you, Penny Mordaunt. Daisy Cooper.
Our country is crying. The Liberal Democrats are promising nothing.
Thank you, Angela Rayner.
The choice at this election is simple. Chaos with Labour. Imagine waking up on the 5th of July to 5 years of reform.
Wales. Thank you. Nigel Farage.
Unlike the rest, I don't need a script. I've come out of retirement, back into politics, with passion in my heart. And I'll tell you, Britain is broken, everyone knows it, and Britain needs reform. The election is over under our system. We know that Keir Starmer's going to win and probably have quite a big majority. The question is, who will lead the opposition? Because for democracy to work, there has to be a voice of opposition. And I put it to you that Ed Davey of the Liberal Democrats won't do that, because he actually agrees with Labour on most things. Rishi Sunak won't do it. Well, he'll probably be in California by then. Anyway, and the Tory party is split down the middle and about to implode in this election. I say to you, I will stand up against open borders. I will stand up and say those that come illegally across the channel should be deported. I will stand up and fight for the millions of men and women running small businesses. I have the courage to take on the mob. Please join the revolt.